All right. So, hi, everyone. I am so excited to introduce AJ Williams from Santa Clara University. We were just, talking about the summer and how hot it's becoming. AJ is here. He has so kindly, agreed to spend the next 30 minutes with us and really talk to us about, Santa Clara and how amazing it is. Right. So, welcome, AJ. We're super excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So maybe we can, maybe can you begin by just sharing with us a little bit about, a little bit about your background, how you found yourself at Santa Clara?
Yeah, sure. Well, originally, a California native from the Bay Area, but have lived in the four corners of the country. So just grew up mostly in Southern California. My family moved out to Atlanta, in the sort of mid '90s. I played basketball, so that kind of took me East Coast and to the East Coast and to the Northwest. So four corners of the country covered, but ended up kind of bounced around, transferred, to the University of Puget Sound from a community college after a prep school. And basketball took me to each of those spots, but ended up at a small school, University of Puget Sound, and which is a traditional liberal arts college in the Northwest, and really liked it. Enjoyed my experience. Definitely benefited from being in a small institution, and small class sizes, all that kind of stuff. And fell into the world of admission because the woman who was number two in admission at Puget Sound was basically the team mom for basketball. And and so she, the day before I was about to drive back to California without a job and everything, she called me up and said, "Hey, we have a position I think you'd be good for." Fell into it. Did a little bit there, and I've been in the field now close to 20 years, mostly at Santa Clara, in part because I came back home, came back to the Bay Area, and of the options that were here, Santa Clara really was sort of a Goldilocks situation. Just the size was right, the feel was right. I knew some folks, and it's sort of an easy transition. So, yeah,
That's amazing.
I've been in admissions as long as I have because I really do enjoy it, and just really demystifying the process for folks who I come into contact with, right? Whether they come from a college going background or not, because I definitely didn't. And so, knowing what I know now, just try to share it.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And I can definitely see some of the similarities between, between Puget Sound and so University of Puget Sound and Santa Clara, the smaller environments, the beautiful environments. I was looking at some virtual videos and things. I haven't been down to Santa Clara as yet, but I was looking at some of the videos and it, looks amazing. And yeah. So
It's a really nice campus. They kind of call us folks sometimes visit and say it looks like a country club, but it's it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. I don't mind going to work. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, it does give off that vibe. I can definitely vouch for that, just having seen all this online. At some point, maybe we will, land up there. And yeah, but, it looks amazing from what I can tell. So that's awesome. So, just going back to the institution, right? So Santa Clara being a Jesuit school, how do you think this actually filters down into the everyday life of students? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think, when folks hear that term Jesuit or religiously affiliated, they would think that their daily life is probably impacted in that way, right? Religiously. And I would say that's probably not the case. In terms of the Jesuits, they are a Catholic order of priests, been around for hundreds of years. And, what they are about and what they value is things like social justice, education, obviously, but doing for others, and just asking those larger societal global questions and confronting those issues. And so I think in a day-to-day sense, that really kind of plays out in the classroom, right? Because it's not just, can we make you the best accountant or finance major? It's what are your decisions? What impacts do those have, right? It's in engineering. Are you creating sustainable products and things like that? If it's talking about, in sociology classes or political science classes, again, what does this decision have in terms of an impact in this community, long term, short term, that kind of thing. So I think those sort of larger societal global concerns are how the Jesuit influence itself sort of plays out on a day to day. That said, in terms of the faith sense, we have students who are very devout in whatever background or denomination they're coming from. We have some students who are not religious at all. But I think so at Santa Clara, there's 3 theology courses over the course of the 4 years that students have to take. And that's the sort of religious requirement, if you will. At Santa Clara, there's upwards of 150 of those to choose from. And so, on all different manners of subjects and topics and all that. So what I appreciate about it, as someone who is not church going or religious in terms of church going and all that, one of the more open-minded approaches to religious studies and all that I think you'll find in the higher ed level. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's great. I do know that Santa Clara is becoming incredibly popular, amongst international students in particular. And I have students, for instance, from Asia, who are very excited about the school, and, they are excited about the different majors. And I was hoping you can tell us a little bit about that. I mean, so if you can share a little bit about, what are the most popular majors, and if you have any new and upcoming majors, I'm sure that our students would love to hear about that too.
Yeah, so at the undergrad level, we're split up into 3 academic divisions. So arts and sciences, which is our largest division, sort of the liberal arts foundation of the university, if you will. Then we have the School of Business, which is kind of what we're known for, and we're the higher ranked programs at the moment. We're in the Silicon Valley, right? So we're in probably one of the better locations for technology and engineering and all of that. So business, engineering, law at the graduate level, those are the areas that we're known for. But as I mentioned before, most of our students are in arts and sciences. So, more popular programs, communication, psychology, biology, programs like that. We're a very strong school in the sense of, and schools like us, I would say, are very, very strong in terms of those pre-law, pre-med, pre-teaching programs, right? Because the access that you have to your advisors, like those smaller student to faculty ratios and all of that, we prepare students very well for entry into those types of programs. And so, those are all popular things. We have it's about a year old now, STEM facility, $300 million STEM facility, excuse me. It is a massive, beautiful building, which has sort of become the new crown jewel of the campus. And so that's been pretty fun to see that, come to, since I've been at Santa Clara, I think they've built upwards of 10 buildings. So it's we're the oldest school in the state, but you would have no clue. I mean, it's pretty nice facilities and all that. So a lot going on. I think there was some recent like an aeronautical program in engineering that's newer. Maybe the real estate program in business is maybe a couple of years old, but we've been doing what we do for quite a while. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. In fact, AJ, a lot of the times when students come to me and they're asking about, so they come to this country thinking that they want to study medicine or law, right? And many of them, when they come in, they just tend to naturally gravitate towards, some big brand colleges, and class sizes. I keep telling them, those are sometimes really big, and you will not get access to professors as much as you would. Like, I feel like Santa Clara with, 5,000 undergrad and, about 3,000 grad school students, I feel like that's a really nice mix. It's not a teeny tiny college. And yet, you will have, you'll have those resources, but you'll also have that one-to-one connection with faculty and that accessibility, which I think is tremendous. So I absolutely love the size of the school, for that matter.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. And honestly, whenever I'm talking to students, period, or families, I say, there's a lot of different options out there, right? And in the United States, you say 4-year schools, there's upwards of 2,000 of those. I don't care what publication you're looking at, rankings and all that. In my opinion, as somebody who's been doing this for almost 20 years, they really fall into one of 3 categories: small, medium, or large. And again, having gone to a small school, socially that can feel a little bit tight. It can be a little, restraining. The larger schools, when you're talking about campuses in the 30, 40, 50, 60 plus thousand, that's a different feel as well, right? And I'm in charge of the transfer process. So I read a ton of applications of students who say, it was very hard for me to connect with anybody, right? Or get in front of my professor or whatever have you. I think medium-sized schools, and I would put medium-sized schools anywhere upwards of a total population of 5 or 7,000 and south of 20. I think those are kind of a sweet spot, right? And at Santa Clara, it's especially, yeah, I mean, we're, a shade under 6,000 undergrad and like you said, 3,000 grad. That's, I think, a good place to be because you have a core group of friends, but yet you're still able to meet new folks. Again, you know your professors, they know you. You almost have all the benefits of that smaller environment, academically especially, but you're in a larger social, and population, type of environment. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I definitely think that is one of the core strengths, right, of Santa Clara. And I know your business school, the Levy School, is also super popular, right? And being at the heart of Silicon Valley, I think is amazing. Not so many colleges can actually, like boast of that. So I think that, that's amazing just in terms of access to, professionals and tech and, businesses and things like that. I think that's amazing. So that's definitely a strength. What, according to you, are some of the other strengths of Santa Clara, and why would you encourage, international students who are coming all the way? Do you have any thoughts about this? We'd love to hear your views.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you said, the location, right? I mean, it's tough to beat, being located where we are in terms of the resources, educationally, professionally, academically, things like that. But also too, being in Northern California, you're within minutes of literally anything you could think about, right? I mean, basically Santa Clara is a suburb of San Jose. San Jose is the largest of the three cities in the Bay Area, right? But that said, the size of it, or the way that it's spread out, it feels more like a big town. So it's not overwhelming. You're not smack dab in the middle of a major metropolitan area. But if you want that feel, if you want to go check out a major city, you have San Francisco right up the road, right? You have Oakland in the other direction. You have the beach, Santa Cruz, 30 minutes to the south. If you want to get up to the mountains, you can do that in a couple of hours. And so I think, the location is great in a lot of different ways. In terms of, the experience, our students are happy, right? We get folks who, are attracted to this area for a lot of reasons, the weather being one of them. It's pretty nice pretty much year round, right? And so folks take advantage of that. They're pretty active. The environment, what I'll say is it's, I think it's rare to find many places at all, but maybe even especially universities where you have faculty and staff who have been there for decades, right? And I think that speaks to the kind of environment it is. I mean, it's in my office alone, we have folks who have been there, I've been there 18 years, 20 years, 20 plus years. So, I think that's kind of rare. And I think that does speak to, again, the environment itself. But I'll also say that, the Bay Area, just like Southern California, New York, and parts of the East Coast, is one of the more diverse and mingling areas of the country. And I think that is valued at Santa Clara. Again, we are a national school. So only about half of our students come from the state of California. The rest come from literally all over the country and all over the world. We're about 8% international, with about 40 countries represented. And so I think that sort of diversity and open-mindedness is attractive to folks.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about the admissions process, right? So, sometimes when students are applying to these, again, colleges in the US, I always get some of these questions, and I know that I can tell them over and over again, but they would certainly appreciate it more coming from you. So I'm curious to hear about, what your thoughts and advice would be on the next set of questions, right? And so the first one is, when students are applying to Santa Clara, right? Again, they have these options. And sometimes, these 16, 17-year-olds are not really sure about what they want to apply to or which major they want to apply to. And so one of the questions I always get is that, is my major actually going to be considered when I'm applying to colleges, right? So is it easier to get into the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, right? That's one thing that I always get a question about. And I always tell them that it's more important to look at the major and make sure that you're applying to that particular major, because it may not be as easy to switch around, once you're in that particular, department or college. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, and again, I believe I understand in terms of sort of when there's, familial pressures or cultural pressures to go in one certain direction and all of that. But what I would tell students is that, especially in the American system, right, or any system that is sort of more built on the liberal arts, the foundation of the liberal arts is sort of that breadth of an educational experience, right? It's where you're taking classes and courses that aren't just for your particular major, but are really going to make you a well-rounded individual. And so I'd really ask this, or tell the students, what are you passionate about? And have an idea of that. Again, on average, college students change their mind and major about 3 to 5 times, right? And so, if you right now, any institution that offers anything to do with computers, computer science, computer engineering, that's the hottest ticket. That's what everybody is trying to do. Or if you have a business school, that's what everybody's trying to do. How do you stand out in a field of all of your classmates going for that, right? And so for me, it's go for what you're passionate for. At school like Santa Clara, and I would say most medium-sized or smaller institutions, we look at you in terms of the school that you're applying to, right? So are you applying to the College of Arts and Sciences or the business school or engineering? I think the differences between the two would be sort of math and science preparation, right? We're going to look a little closer at that math level if you're going for business, that math and science level if you're going for engineering. Where it is becoming more sort of dependent upon the major is in those higher or more popular programs, right? So computer science and engineering at Santa Clara, for example, had a 15% admit rate this year, right? Our overall admit rate was 42%. So that lets you know just how competitive that was, right? I mean, and it comes down to some very tough decisions because we simply can't take all of the students who are admissible for the university, for a particular major, that kind of thing. And so, I would just say that it's best to just be an individual and don't just go with the flow and don't just go for accounting because your mom or dad are accountants or engineering because they want you to do engineering. What are you passionate about? Pursue that. The flexibility as well of medium-sized or smaller institutions, you can double major, you can major and minor, so ask about those policies at the schools that you're applying to. Because
Right.
to your point earlier, yeah, if you think it's going to be easy to sort of backdoor and apply to the classics just so you get into the university and then try to get into engineering, probably not going to happen, right? Because there's policies around it, so.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. One of the things that AJ I really appreciate about Santa Clara is the transparency, right? So I know that when I was, poking around on the website and looking through, I came upon this little table that explained, if you're looking at engineering, this is the GPA, this is the GPA band we're looking for. If you're looking at the liberal arts and sciences, this is the band. And I think that is so valuable from an applicant's perspective because, sometimes if you just say it's an average admit rate of 40% or 50%, that can sometimes be misleading if the student wants to do computer science, right? So really just breaking it down. And I really wish more universities would get inspired and, actually just break it down like that, because I feel like that makes it super clear to students and it makes it just puts their expectations in perspective, right?
Yeah.
So really appreciate that.
For sure. I mean, we are, and what I like to tell students all the time is that, your chances of getting into school or colleges are really a lot stronger than you think, right? Unless your list is all in the Ivies, right, or the Stanfords of the world. No, you got to be realistic. You got to kind of spread your list out. But the national average admit rate for all those 2,000 plus 4-year institutions in the country hovered around like the 65, 66% range for 2 decades, right? So you just need to be, especially in this age of Google, right? You have information at your fingertips. And so, do the research. Most public institutions or systems will tell you the base requirements for entry into their campuses. Private schools deal mostly with averages. So you really just want to be in that ballpark, right? And again, within those bands and things like that. But, those bands really are just telling you what the middle 50% is. So that means we go above and below that. right? It's just, again, being realistic, but also doing your research, right? Because again, we don't do interviews, but we offer information sessions Monday through Friday, most Saturdays throughout the school year. So, and if you're international and you can't make it, we do them virtual, right? So do the research into the schools that you're looking at, and just put yourself in a decent position.
Right. No, absolutely. And then, is there any, disadvantage to someone who's coming in undeclared, right? Do you think that, no?
No, in part again because we admit into schools,
Right.
right? Computer science and engineering is the only program in Santa Clara now where we're kind of admitting you into that program, right? But other than that, engineering and what also too I try to break folks of is there's a lot of different engineering areas, right? We have electrical and computer, we have mechanical, we have civil, we have general. So folks get caught up on one particular thing because it sounds good, it sounds hot, but there's a lot of different options. But anyway, to the point, we admit into the School of Engineering or into the business school or into arts and sciences. And both engineering and business school at Santa Clara, when students come in, they make everyone undeclared, right? And because they want everybody to sort of get a survey of all the different areas offered. And it's not really towards the end of sophomore year that they put pressure on you to say, okay, well, what are you thinking about majoring? You should probably, figure that out. So yeah, folks come into undeclared to each of our 3 schools all the time. Our policy is whatever school you've been admitted into, you're in that school for at least your first year before you could then try to transfer to a different school, right? But if you're in our smaller programs, business or engineering, they're easier to transfer into the College of Arts and Sciences because that's our largest division, right? A little tougher going the other way around because of space availability.
Right. And that totally makes sense, right? And that's what I always tell students. You need to, focus on the major that you're applying to, right? But I'm glad to see that they're able to. So once they come into engineering, again, because one of the questions I get asked is that I think I want to do engineering. I'm not really sure what kind of engineering I want to do. And, and so I always say that, once you go in, I mean, it's good to know that they get to explore with a couple of different, topics and courses before they finally have to pick. So that's awesome. Right.
Yeah, and it varies. Again, being in charge of the transfer process, I read applications all the time of students at much larger institutions who say, look, I got into the school, but then in order to get into that major, there was a specific GPA that I need, certain classes and all of that. And then it was just a tough situation, And so I think, again, the benefit of the smaller schools, medium-sized schools, is that they're a lot more flexible in terms of, working with students to get to the destination they're trying to get to.
Absolutely. That makes sense. And how about testing? Can we talk a moment about testing and, test optional admissions? And so again, I get students who are going to say that, I know they said that they are test optional, but are they truly test optional? Or will I have an advantage if I actually present a test score? So 2 students who have, similar, GPAs and backgrounds and coming from similar schools sometimes, right? From the same city, does that make a difference if a student has a good test score versus another one?
No, we are truly test optional. And I stress the truly part because I do understand that it's sort of the wild, wild west in terms of what that means, in schools throughout the country, right? Some schools are test optional for admission, but if you want to be considered for any academic scholarships, you need to present scores. Some schools are test free and don't look at them at all. We are truly test optional in the sense that we consider students the same for admission, for any type of academic or merit-based monies, regardless of whether or not they submit an SAT or an ACT. Quite frankly, there's a stronger socioeconomic correlation to who does what on tests because it's about resources. If you have the ability to, take test prep and take the test multiple times, you're going to do better, period. So for us, it's really, if they're submitted, they're treated as additional information, but they do not factor into our consideration of whether or not you were admissible or meritorious, right? And in terms of your academic career during high school, that's going to speak more to your abilities. Yeah.
Right. Great. Thank you for that advice. And in terms of like, essays, right, with the whole chat GPT revolution and students really leaning on it. And I know this is fairly, a new
Fairly
space
new.
still. Yeah,
Right. Yes.
everyone's
Yes.
trying to figure this out. I was at a couple of conferences this year, and, that was a hot topic, right? Everyone's talking about chat GPT, and our college is going to be, switching their essays around, right? Or are they going to be little check boxes, asking, have you used chat GPT? And if so, what have you used it for? So do you have any advice for students who, are inclined to lean on ChatGPT to write college essays? And I guess the second part to this
Yeah.
question is, are there any changes that you're expecting at Santa Clara at the admissions, in terms of supplemental questions or anything related to ChatGPT or artificial intelligence, right? Just to keep it more broad.
Yeah. Right. No, what I would say is it's too new a technology for us to make any sort of broad sweeping changes or declarations around it. Um, what I would say though is that in the personal side, what we look for is the student. We're looking for authenticity. Who are you? What are you about? What's your personality like? Would you make a good roommate, classmate, addition to the campus community? So again, and we've in the office just sort of messed around with Chat GPT to see what its capabilities are and things like that. And I would say that, if anything, it's probably good for the start, the spark of an idea, right? And then from there, if you kind of go and refine it and things like that. But the reality is you're going to have to do a lot of writing at a school like Santa Clara. Um, Pretty sure you're not going to be able to use Chat GPT for all of it, right? So you should probably, as a student, get in the practice of clearly communicating and expressing yourself. Um, that said, again, it's so new. I don't know if we're going to be able to tell when we're reading tens of thousands of applications whether or not this counselor letter or this essay was crafted that way. But if you're a student, what I'll say is there's a lot of different opportunities in the application for you to have written responses. And so you really want to make sure that all of those are consistent, right? And if your essay just stands out and is clearly a lot more sophisticated, if you will, than the rest of your written responses, that's probably not a good.
Yeah, absolutely, AJ. I 100% agree with that. I remember just reflecting on my time on the admissions teams as well. Sometimes you can see there's a big discrepancy between the personal statement and even the supplemental questions, right? Or even,
Right.
their little blurb in the additional information section. You can tell that quality is completely different,
Right.
right? And so, yes, absolutely. I think that consistency is going to be important, right? All right. Okay. And how about for the kids who want to study, and I call them kids, but how about, the high school students who are interested in engineering and, they want to submit their maker portfolios and they want to submit their, YouTube, website links and,
Sure.
things like that. Is that something that's realistically considered in the admissions office? Because I tend to tell students that, only provide what you're asked for, right? Let's not, again, going back to my time on, in admissions where we have 6 minutes or 7 minutes to review applications. I'm, putting
Yeah.
myself in your shoes and, telling them that let's provide only what is necessary. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. And is there a space for them to be able to do that if they wanted to do so?
Well, I would say again that this comes down to sort of the research you've done on each institution, because some schools aren't going to ask for that. Some schools don't want it at all. Some schools, like Santa Clara, we have no space for it, right? And again, I just recently was kind of looking at the stats. This year, I saw over 3,000, close to 4,000 applications, right? Because again, I oversee first year and transfer, reading. Again, when we get into it, we don't have the time to go into everybody's resume, to go into everybody's links that they send or go over in our portfolio. There's really not the space for that in our process. If you're applying to, maybe sort of super selective schools or even smaller liberal arts colleges and they do interviews and things like that, there might be space for that. But at Santa Clara, no, there really isn't in our application process the opportunity to share that. And what I would say too is that because there are sort of different, departmental, there's art scholarships, there's music scholarships, things like that. it makes more sense to send those directly to them as opposed to the admissions team.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. And I know sometimes they will try to, smuggle this in the additional information section and provide links. And, sometimes,
I'll say we only do it if it's intriguing. If
right.
there's a real reason, like, you really were on Good Morning America or whatever, then yeah, I might check that out. Or so it's rare, in part because so many students are providing these things these days, right? So
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's why I always tell them it's so important that, the pieces that are actually asked or the questions that are actually asked to you, the admissions team, is more interested in reading about those things. So you have to make sure that that is really, strong, right? And representing you in the best possible light. And that's what's going to entice them to want to learn more about you, right? And yeah, so that's great. I know we're almost at that 30-minute mark, and I have one or two more questions if you have a few
totally fine.
minutes more,
Yeah.
right? Okay, fantastic. So I guess, just thinking about international students, right? I have a really soft spot for them, like I was saying earlier, because I was once an international student myself, and, just navigating this entire space can definitely feel overwhelming. And many of them are, leaving their families and coming here, and it's their first time sometimes to the United States. And so my question is, what are some of the resources that you think Santa Clara actually provides to students to be able to make them feel at home?
Yeah, sure. So for us, I would say that our ISS office, so International Student Services, that is sort of the main hub of the resources dedicated towards international students, right? And that office works with both the undergrad and graduate population. For our grad students, they help with job placement and things like that. So that's a very strong office at Santa Clara in terms of those types of resources. But international students will arrive at the university a little bit earlier than the rest of the student population. We try to get folks acclimated to the general area, of San Jose and kind of surrounding areas. But also, too, I think just sort of the nature of Santa Clara, right? The fact that we are medium sized, the fact that we are very residential. We have a 2-year for our first year incoming students, a 2-year on campus housing requirement, right? So most students live on or around the university. And so just the nature of that smaller environment where, not all the international students are living with each other, they're dispersed within the overall campus community. And so their ability to connect and create a social environment within the university is strong right off the bat, as it is for all of our students, right? We have one of the higher retention rates in the country, meaning continuation from first to second year. And it's around 94, 95% annually. To me, that says regardless of whoever a student is or where they're coming from, they like it once they're there, right? So that coupled with having one of the higher 4-year graduation rates, they get there, they like it, they stick around, they're successful, they get out on time. So I think just the nature and the success of Santa Clara's environment itself, students come in regardless of who they are, where they're coming from, and they're able to fold into the fabric pretty nicely.
That's amazing. I think a 94-95% retention rate is fantastic, right? And yeah, that definitely speaks volumes about what the university is doing to make these students feel safe and secure and all that good stuff, right? Fantastic. Do you have any last, words of advice for students coming in? Any tips, any insights you'd like to provide?
No, again, I'll fall back to something I said earlier in the sense of, the 3 different types of schools: small, medium, large, because I do think that the experience educationally and socially is different at each of those different types. So students should really do their research on that. I would say too that, the demographics of an institution are probably something that you want to pay attention to. How diverse is it? Because I think that will speak to how welcoming an environment it can be potentially or not. We are all living through some very interesting times. And so just kind of looking at where an institution is geographically might speak to some of those things as well. Um, but yeah, it just you got to get out there and see as many as you can. But again, I understand that the difficulty for international students, so just make use of those online resources that are there. Ask around. If you go to a school that sends students all over, talk to the counselors, see how those students who have gone on to school X, Y, or Z, or whatever school you're looking at, how are they faring? Do they like it? Do they feel connected socially? That kind of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tap into, other students that have, graduated from your school and learn more about that from them, because that's when you're going to get a really genuine and authentic, insight from, right? So yes,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
awesome.
Pull,
Thank
pull
you.
the curtain back.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I'm hoping that's what we've done a little bit today as well, especially for these students. And thank you so, so much for being so incredible and, so supportive of this community, and absolutely appreciate your advice and your insights